fat boy, the fat boy. We say good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Yes. Hello, baby boy. Hello, baby boy. I'm gonna read, okay? Okay. Excuse me, I'm trying to drink coffee. Bad boy. What was that? What was that? Okay, stop. Stop. Sierra, you want to come say hello? All right, fat boy, stop. It's too much. Go. Go. Love you. Crazy. Crazy dog. Okay, so we left off at interpreting your contracts and your archetypical wheel. In Chapter 8, you investigated your reasons for choosing your personal archetypes and began to identify the challenges and problems that you need to address, along with the talents and blessings you ought to appreciate. All these gifts and challenges reflect aspects of your divine potential. The wheel and the three-column model are like the left and right hands of your body. Using both systems in tandem provides you a symbolic perspective on individual experiences and a conscious method of determining your future actions. I like that. A conscious method of determining my future actions. In this chapter, you'll be interpreting the archetypal wheel as a whole, pulling together all the different interpretations. Before I give you the specific steps to follow, however, I want you to see what the process looks like in general terms. My wheel. Although I have written and spoken frequently on how my professional life took shape, I have not been as open about my personal life. Because I work with my own archetypes and energies every day, I did not cast my own archetypal wheel in careful detail until I had worked with those of many hundreds of people in my workshops. But while writing sacred contracts, I decided that the time had come to take a good look at my own life's journey. Since you already know something about me and my work, I hope that my interpretations of my wheel may help you with your own. My archetypes in their respective houses appear in figure 6. So she's got Queen in her first house, Intuitive Healer, Hermit in her second house, Judge in her third house, Author in her fourth, Pioneer in her fifth, Victim in her sixth, Mystic Nun in her seventh, Child in her eighth, Saboteur in her ninth, Prostitute in her 10th, and Teacher in her 11th, Intuitive Healer in her 12th. So those are all her archetypes: Queen, Hermit, Judge, Author, Pioneer, Victim, Mystic Nun, Child, Saboteur, Prostitute, Teacher, Intuitive Healer. Like 12 separate strands of a thread, my archetypes and houses stretch backwards through each of the years of my life to my earliest childhood memories. Each of these patterns had such a loud voice in my spirit that I can connect with it easily simply by closing my eyes for a moment. I can feel its energy penetrate my thoughts and perceptions. To know and understand yourself and your place in this world, you need to unravel these 12 threads to keep your fingertips on them so that you can sense when they vibrate to current events and interactions in which you find yourself. As you follow me through my wheel, keep track of any associations that spring up in your own mind. The teacher resides in my 11th house, underscoring the primary way I relate to the world. So yes, she says in the 11th house, it is highest relationship to the world. Underscoring the primary way I relate to the world, which I see as a classroom. Following the teacher thread, my own greatest teachers from childhood onward have been my family and a line of superb school teachers and professors, most of whom were Roman Catholic nuns. The nun in my house of relationships reflects how I extend the influence of those teachers through my own spirit into those with whom I engage. Not only did the nuns wake up my love for theology, history, and literature, but along with my parents, they also taught me about the domain of angels, saints, and the intimate presence of God. The nun in me also does most of my book shopping, except that she never heard of the vow of poverty. The nun is so prominent in me that while in college I considered entering the convent. Relating to the world through a prayerful life was positively seductive. And many of my friends did enter, drawing me even closer to the community of nuns. Yet in spite of the spiritual atmosphere that such a community could offer me, I felt that it was not a fit, at least not in this lifetime. I needed to be free from the traditional vows so that I could relate to people, symbolically speaking, from outside the convent walls. Yet when I teach and when I do readings on people, I am still under vows to be of service and a vow of silence. If I perceive an illness in someone who has not come to me for a reading, for example, I don't volunteer that information. I maintain my silence unless I am specifically asked about it, either by that person or by a physician. Often when I use my intuition, I first close my eyes and enter the inner chapel of my spirit. I visualize it as a chapel on the campus where I went to college, which was also a convent. It is the crucible of my spirit, the third column of my symbolic sight. My nun and my teacher are two of the three archetypes that have the most presence in my workshops. The classroom is a theater in which I can lead people through their fears and into a passion to live more liberated and a healed life. I have a fire in me that wants to blast people out of their pattern of yearning for a more fully realized life, and yet foregoing every opportunity to bring it about. I no longer simply want to help people heal. Rather, I want them to fall in love with the life they have been given. I often give the appearance of being nearly ruthless on stage when I am interacting with certain people. But in those moments, I am looking through the personality and into their heart of their passion to transform the ordinariness of their lives into the extraordinary, meaning their greater potential in this lifetime. When I spot someone on that point of breakthrough, my teacher takes a back seat to the queen in me. The classroom becomes transformed into my royal court, and I symbolically decapitate people who are yearning for liberation from their fears, yet are prevented by those very fears from moving forward. My queen, often appearing aggressive or mocking, puts their fears on the chopping block. If I were a sweet and easy queen, then, as I am after hours, I would allow them to give me teary-eyed excuses full of blame for those who destroyed their potential. Blame gives us permission to remain where we are, while pressuring others to tiptoe around our wounds. Blame does not heal. It does not produce change. Forgiveness does. Because of that, my queen wants people to confront the way they have cut off their own heads and blocked all communication between their hearts and their mind. As a rule, I don't soften my interactions with individuals in a workshop or reading until I can feel in their energy that they have made a conscious connection to their excuses or self-sabotage, their passions, and at least some of their archetypal patterns. Then I know that I can call back their spirits and get back on their life's course. My queen appeared long before I first turned a classroom into a royal court. Ever since my encounters with the nuns in high school and college, I have been inspired by stories of powerful women. Observing these extraordinary women administer the girls' school and college that I attended during the height of the feminist movement contributed to my resolve to become a woman who could take care of herself, even if it meant that I spent my life unmarried. I would not become dependent on others for my well-being and survival. I owe this inspiration to my father, who encouraged me at every turn to be self-sufficient. My father, a Marine who fought at the Guadalcanal in World War II, was a man of impeccable integrity. He lived in Maine. He lived the Marine honor code, Semper Fidelis, or always faithful, his entire life. He taught me how important honor is. Because of him, I also have a hobby of reading history, especially military and political history. The prostitute in my 10th house, highest potential, reveals the fear of dependency and compromise that my father inoculated in me from earliest childhood, and it reveals the challenge I face of being tempted to negotiate my personal power, to sell my intuitive skills. People have offered me large sums of money in exchange for winning lottery numbers, for instance, as if I'd sell them to anybody, if I could actually predict them. This would hardly be using my skills for a higher good, which is another reason I believe I have been led to create a sound professional life as a teacher. I aim to help others find their highest potential as I communicate my own insights. This desire to show the way for others has led me to work with progressive colleges and universities to establish courses in intuitive studies and energy medicine. My first electric encounter with my own intuitive abilities, which warned me to be careful how I use them, came when I was 15. I had just bought a book on palmistry and was flipping through it when my dear friend Maureen insisted that I read the palm of a neighbor of hers named Lucille. Although I had no idea how to read palms, and still don't, I accepted the challenge on a whim. When Lucille sat down with us, I looked dumbly at her palm and heard myself tell her that she had been married twice. A friend of Lucille's, who had been observing all this rather skeptically, gave me a scornful laugh. "You're wrong, kid," she said. "She's been married 3 times. Suddenly, an unfamiliar energy ignited within me, and I could feel heat shoot from the bottom of my spine to the tip of my head. I straightened my spine as if it had just been transmuted into pure steel. My body felt intensely present, although a feeling of impersonal distance from Lucille descended on me. I was aware of no longer being a child and felt as if I had traveled a great distance in the blink of an eye. My voice seemed strangely steady, and out of my mouth came the words, "Yes, but your second marriage was never consummated. Lucille lunged at me, lifted me up by my clothing, and dragged me to the front door, kicking me out. When I got home, I told my mother what had happened. I expected her to be annoyed by what I had said to her neighbor. I also asked her what consummated meant, since I really didn't know the word at the time. Instead, Mother laughed so hard that she had to sit down. Did you really say that? She asked several times as she wiped her eyes. After she stopped laughing, she turned serious. God has given you a very special gift, and you must take care of it, she said. Someday you'll be shown what to do with it. In the meantime, pray for guidance. The entire incident gradually faded from memory until one night when I was 29. In a peculiar dream, I was visited by a guide who told me, I've returned. Now it's time for you to go to work. Before a year had passed, I began to sense people's health conditions intuitively. Within 2 years, I was giving readings as a medical intuitive. As grateful as people often seemed for the help and guidance I was able to give them, however, I never forgot the look of sudden rage on Lucille's face as she came at me that day. Perhaps she too was an angel sent to warn me to be careful how I used my intuitive gifts. My author is the fourth house, which rules the home, reflecting how deeply my home is my workspace. I have worked from home since I was 29, and I designed my home around the needs of the author as well as the hermit. Second house, values. Spending time alone is crucial to my well-being, and when I'm not out teaching, I prefer a quiet life with close friends and family. When I was in third grade, for instance, I announced to my mother that I would become a writer. This is what my personal declaration of independence, and from that moment on, every decision that had anything to do with school or my professional interests was measured against whether it would enhance or detract from that goal. I am completely ungrounded in the worlds of financial energy, legal matters, and inheritance. Inheritance represented by the eighth house. My need for caretaking and guardians in this realm is signified by the child in that house. Somehow I've never feared lacking actual resources, even though I feared being dependent. For instance, when the publishing company I was helping to found in 1982, along with 2 friends, was not yet producing any income, I took a job as a copywriter with a public relations firm. I had absolutely no interest in the work, however, and within a month of starting, I was fired. That night, calculating my financial resources, I realized that I had $76 in the bank. My monthly rent was $400 and the fuel bill almost $200. My first thought in assessing this situation was, okay, this means God will send me a problem that costs me more than $76. The next day, my mother called with some unexpected news. 12 years before, in an out-of-character venture, she had purchased a few thousand shares of a stock that had been selling for 3 cents a share. My brother and I teased her relentlessly about this investment until she refused to discuss it any longer, and we had all long since forgotten about it. Now my mother was calling to tell me that a stockbroker had contacted her out of the blue to ask if she remembered buying that penny stock. He then told her that the stock was now worth more than $6 a share. She told him to sell it immediately, and with my father's blessing, divided the proceeds among all 3 of the kids. My child's faith pulled me through that situation in typical 8th house way, which with the blessings of another person's resources. in this case, a generous and devoted mother. My victim archetype has played a substantial role in my health since my childhood years, so its presence in my house of occupation and health is appropriate. Early on in my days at school, whenever I was under pressure, I experienced migraines and other maladies. My body has always been almost instantaneously responsive to physical or emotional stress. Having gone through a number of health challenges and years of chronic pain, I know what it's like to wait in the doctor's office to find out whether you have an illness for which there is no cure. Since I work with the energy of health and illness to try to help others heal their ailments, the victim also makes sense in this house. Indeed, the victim in me identifying with the victim in others inspired my book, Why People Don't Heal. As I was working on that book, I realized that every time I was preparing to write a book or was about to receive an inspiration, I was visited by some sort of health crisis. Before and during work on the anatomy of the spirit, for instance, I suffered from a series of debilitating migraine headaches. After witnessing a woman in one of my workshops engage in what I call woundology, trading on the currency of her past traumas, I began asking myself the question that inspired my next book. Why don't people heal? The day after I first asked that question, I woke up with the onset of what would become years of chronic pain and occasional depressions. These ailments did not begin to abate until I recognized that I myself had fallen prey to becoming a woundologist, someone who defies herself by the bad things that have happened to her. As the saying goes, we teach what we need to learn. My own body had been a laboratory for my ideas. The saboteur in my ninth house, spirituality, has particular meaning for me, but perhaps from an unconventional perspective. I have never wanted to be ruled by the religious doctrines and dogmas that I recognized from my earlier years in grade school were not true. I remember vividly the moment when I broke from the Roman Catholic Church. One day in third grade, I asked the priest how Jesus had been born. Father replied, Jesus had simply appeared in the lap of Mother Mary. Even without yet having been told the facts of life, I instinctively knew that this was nonsense. Yet my faith and spirituality have always been strong, and I've always had a rich and delicious feeling that angels and saints surrounded me at every moment. Though I have rebelled against an institution, my saboteur ensures my own safe passage into the spiritual dimension, having blown up the obstacles in my way. In my workshops and readings on my own saboteur constantly detects the saboteurs in other people's psyches. As I verbally push their backs against the wall, I do in service of their divine potential. I hold the thought in my mind for them. Do you really want to look back on your life and see how wonderful it could have been had you not been afraid to live it? Although outside of my workplace, I have little concern about how other people live their lives. As soon as I step in front of a classroom, I go on a search and destroy mission to find my students' spiritual panic. This is where all real pain comes from, a desperation that we will never accomplish what we were meant to do in life. Deep in the unconscious, our spiritual potential lies in wait for us to release it. Sometimes you will have to blow things out of your own way to get to it. I would have been surprised if my intuitive healer had shown itself anywhere else but in my 12th house, where the unconscious and our connection to the collective reside. Despite my early detachment with the Catholic dogma, I never once questioned that each of us has a guardian angel and that our lives matter to a loving God. As I grew older, I was attracted to the writings of the mystics and spiritual masters, which ultimately led me to graduate work in theology. This is my golden string, to borrow a phrase from Don Bede Griffiths, the one that gives me strength and inspiration, hope and delight, and was my lifeline of the throes of woundology. The mystic is in partnership with my pioneer archetype, which is in the house of creativity, luck, and the pleasurable side of life. As a pioneer, I rely on my creativity not just to write and teach, but to reshape my life moment by moment. I constantly explore the teachings that we create our own reality, whether by examining my own life or encouraging people to change their own. I initially encountered my pioneer through my desire to do something unique, a feeling that all writers must share. I wanted to live a life unlike that of anybody else. And at age 12, I announced to my mother that I would not have a conventional life of marriage and children. I wanted to explore always beyond the horizon I could see and blaze new trails. Yet, when I think of my life and my 12 archetypes, I feel guided and destined to walk a path that began long ago. My desire to share this vision with others inspired me to lead people into the unconscious spaces behind their eyes so that they too could come to realize that their lives are anything but accidents. With your archetype's energy, I am sure you can trace the hand of God and destiny weaving in and out of every moment of your life. Life is meant to be a mystery, and we will never be able to make it a logical adventure, but we can interpret the clues that the hand of God leaves on our path. With any luck, and with the blessing of heaven, I hope that my sacred contract can serve you on your journey. If I were sitting with you, teaching you how to gain access to your own unconscious companions, I would symbolically take you by the hand and say, "Follow me, because I know how to find them. I know how they disguise themselves in your psyche and spirit, and how they hide themselves in the events of your life. Now that you have identified your archetypes, you too can start spotting their influence at any moment. When I look at someone's face, I look beyond that face and into the cellular memory in my heart that says, 'Finally, you and I have met again, and now we must find out why.' To sense an archetypical thread connecting you to another person is to connect with a soul agreement that is finally manifested in time and space. Ask yourself what you know about yourself today and what you don't know. What are your mysteries, and what have been your greatest influences, both positive and difficult? Ask yourself, when did who I am today begin? Choose the house and archetype that immediately inspires an answer, and jump over to your contract through that door. Random interpretation gives free rein to your memory and imaginings, but others are more comfortable following the numerical order of the chart. Find your comfort zone and take it from there. Now here are some steps you can follow in using your archetypal wheel to interpret your own contract. So that was a long chapter. Let me read the archetype we left off at. Hi, Fat Boy. Hi. Hold on, please. Let's see here. Where did I leave off at? liberator, lover, martyr, mediator, mentor. A mentor is a teacher in whom you can place your implicit trust. The word comes from the character in the Odyssey to whom Odysseus, on setting out for Troy, had entrusted the care of his house and education of his son Telemachus. Today, the role of mentor is crucial in a surprising range of life situations, from many forms of art and artisanship to business and spiritual practice. Mentors do more than just teach. They pass on wisdom and refine their students' character. In its shadow aspect, however, the mentor can take on an overbearing attitude that is more imposing control than imparting wisdom. A characteristic of the shadow mentor is an inability to allow the student to move on into role of master, maintaining control over the student's development of mind, body, and skills. The distance between this archetype and the teacher is mainly one of degree. If you have shown a lifelong pattern of taking individual students under your wing and guiding many aspects of their life, this may be an appropriate choice. Films: mentor Alec Guinness to Mark Hamill in Star Wars. Takashi Shimura to Toshiro Mifune in The Seven Samurai. Yul Brynner to Horst Buchholz in The Magnificent Seven. Betty Davis to Ann Baxter in All About Eve. Paul Newman to Tom Cruise in The Color of Money. Film: teacher, Bette Davis in Corn is Green. Sidney Poitier in To Stir with Love. Michael Caine in Educating Rita. Glenn Ford in Blackbird Jungle. Television: James Gandolfini to Robert Imperioli in The Sopranos. Fiction: Fagin to Oliver in Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, The Shadow. Drama: The Miracle Worker by William Gibson. Fiction: The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, Shadow. Hard Times by Charles Dickens, Shadow. Religion and myth: Krishna in Indian scripture, the spiritual mentor of Arjuna. Chiron in Greek myth, a wise centaur who had extensive knowledge of the healing arts and tutored Asclepius, Theseus, and Achilles. Ninsun in Sumerian legend, the mother of Gilgamesh, who serves as his counselor. Okay, that's it for now. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.